Senate Armed Services Committee meets today to receive testimony on the posture of the United States Army. I want to thank our witnesses, Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll and Acting Chief of Staff of the Army, General Chris Linney, for being here. Thank you, gentlemen. Today, the Army is being asked to conduct more demanding missions in more locations against more capable adversaries than at any time in a generation. Russia's war of choice in Ukraine has underscored the enduring importance of land power in high-intensity conflict. In that theater, the U.S. Army has played a critical role in helping Ukrainians plan for and resource their forces through the Security Assistance Group Ukraine. Our Army has also harvested many lessons from that partnership to inform our modernization. At the same time, we're witnessing the Army's essential contributions to ongoing operations in CENTCOM. U.S. Army soldiers, like those from the 1st Battalion, 43rd Air Defense Artillery, are using Patriot systems to help defend our service members, partners, and allies against persistent missile and drone threats. Similarly, the Arkansas National Guard's 142nd Field Artillery Brigade is employing ground-based missiles to strike enemy targets deep inside Iran. These actions demonstrate both the reach of America's Army only 5 years since President Trump rightly chose to build new weapons instead of tolerating Vladimir Putin's constant violations of the INF Treaty. Meanwhile, the pacing challenge posed by China demands that the Army be prepared to support joint force operations across vast distances under persistent threat and at a tempo we have not seen in decades. Many think of the Western Pacific as solely naval and air theater, but our two witnesses certainly do not agree with that. Our ground forces continue to make absolutely crucial contributions to security in the First Island chain, including through massive and growing partnerships with our South Korean, Japanese, and Filipino treaty allies. All these demands underscore the importance of fielding and sustaining the most advanced and capable systems in the world, from missile defense and long-range strike weapons to resilient command and control systems and new methods of breaching defensive lines. These capabilities are not theoretical. They are being employed today to protect American lives and uphold stability. The Army provides the backbone of our global logistics. This enables joint operations, and it delivers the land combat power that it takes to deter aggression and, if necessary, to win decisively. The Army must be ready, but our readiness today is frankly uneven. Modernization efforts have produced promising capabilities, but not at the speed or scale required by the threat. I think our witnesses will agree with that. At the same time, the Army continues to struggle with the operational readiness rates of its primary equipment, its maintenance backlogs, and its munition stockpiles. All are under extreme strain. Under Secretary Driscoll, the Army has made significant strides to prepare for changing combat conditions. So I commend the Secretary on that. The Army has acted with discipline and foresight to develop a new generation of weapons: the precision strike missile, low-cost munitions, the new MV-75 helicopter, the M1E3 tank, and finally, after 20 years of struggles, a more coherent command and control system. I also appreciate the Army's improved approach to modernization of our organic industrial base. I remain troubled that the Pentagon is not moving fast enough, or has not been moving fast enough, to improve the logistics capability and capacity of the Joint Force. And the Secretary will want to talk about that certainly today. Logistics sustainment and prepositioning will be decisive in any future conflict. The Army must demonstrate how it will enable the Joint Force to operate effectively across that theater. This will require additional resources to bring unmanned surface and air vehicles into the force at scale, to purchase next-generation capabilities to sustain U.S. forces in dispersed locations. I want to also commend the Army, led by U.S. Army Europe, in developing new methods of warfare in response to tactical and operational lessons learned in Ukraine. The Eastern Flank Deterrence Line concept consists of largely unmanned tripwire combined with layered missile defenses and distributed strike capabilities. It's exactly the direction we need to go, and I hope the Army will field those capabilities to European command rapidly. So I look forward to hearing from Secretary Driscoll and General Neve about how to handle these challenges. We will need clear priorities, disciplined execution, and transparent communication as we move forward to secure that the U.S. Army remains ready, modern, and capable of meeting the moment. With that, I turn to my colleague and friend, Ranking Member Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Driscoll, General Neve, welcome. Thank you for both of your outstanding service, and please convey my appreciation to the soldiers and civilians serving under your command. I want to begin by expressing my deepest condolences to the families of those who have sacrificed and were lost in the Middle East over the past several months. Their sacrifice deserves our greatest respect and gratitude. I also want to acknowledge the absence of General Randy George. Last month, Secretary Hicks has removed him as Army Chief of Staff without explanation. General George is one of more than 24 general and flag officers that were fired over the past year, not for course, not for misconduct, but for reasons the Secretary of Defense has refused to share with this committee. What we do know is this: nearly 60% of those fired are female or black in a field where women and minorities represent less than 20% of general officers. Now, that is a disturbing pattern that directly undermines the merit-based promotion system. Secretary Driscoll, General Neve, these issues are of great importance to this committee, and I would ask for forthright answers today. The Army has been extensively deployed over the past year. The Army's tactical contributions to the operations in Venezuela, Iran, the Red Sea, and its continued support to Ukraine have been outstanding. The soldiers and commanders executing these missions have done their jobs with great professionalism and skill. I disagree with many of President Trump's foreign interventions, but my concerns are strategic, not with our military forces. Secretary Driscoll, last year, you announced an ambitious plan called the Army Transformation Initiative. Among other changes, this initiative combines major commands, restructures brigade combat teams, reorganizes aviation, and moves toward capability-based portfolio acquisition. These are significant changes. I want to understand how the Army is balancing this transformation while it is conducting combat operations overseas and maintaining a significant role on the southwest border. Secretary Driscoll, I would ask for updates on these efforts. The Army is also facing a nearly $2 billion readiness shortfall, largely because DHS has failed to reimburse the Army for border support missions. The committee will want to understand, and we made some progress in the closed session, what this means in concrete terms. I've received concerning reports about the potential for canceling training rotations, grounded flight hours, and reduced Guard and Reserve training resources. These are real costs for real units. I would note that rather than addressing this shortfall, the reconciliation bill under consideration in the Senate would send roughly $70 billion more to DHS, the same department that has not paid its bills to the Army. At the same time, the Army has proposed increased funding for important programs like munitions procurement. That effort is well-reasoned. However, even if production timelines shorten from 3 years to 2, the munitions gap we have suffered from the war in Iran does not close overnight. I would like to know where Army munitions stocks stand today and what the realistic replenishment timeline looks like given expenditures in Iran. Further, while I understand the Army is realigning its civilian workforce, the department has been far too slow to start civilian hiring after last year's reckless DOGE cuts and hiring freezes. The Army has also curbed its Smart Scholars program, which fast-tracks STEM-trained civilians into future leadership roles, and has disrupted partnerships between Army depots and local community colleges. Secretary Driscoll, the Army's civilian workforce is a readiness asset. Hollowing out has long-term consequences that may not show up in this year's budget, but will absolutely show up in this committee's hearings years from now. I want to hear how you are planning to speed up civilian hiring and ensure the Army is investing in its future workforce. Finally, I am interested in hearing more about the Army's modernization priorities, the development of next-generation helicopters and tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, UAS and counter-UAS systems, offensive and defensive fires, and the evolving pre-positioning model are welcoming efforts, very much so. In a congested logistic environment where we stage our material will matter as much as what we have on hand. I would appreciate an update on how the Army is balancing these efforts. I look forward to your testimony, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. And Secretary Driscoll, you are now recognized for your opening statement.
Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members, it is an absolute privilege to address you today. After a year in this position, I am prouder than ever to represent our soldiers and their families. As all of you know, our soldiers are the very best in the entire world. They're bold, decisive, and they can overcome anything when we properly enable them. That's why I spent over 130 days on the road across 19 countries and 25 states to hear directly from them. I ate with them, put hands on their equipment, and had candid discussions with soldiers of every single rank. What I heard was clear. Our soldiers are ready to innovate and win, but our own bureaucracy and regulations are still holding them back. Getting what soldiers need to win and making the Army budget actually work for them is definitionally a bipartisan topic, and I know all of you agree with that. You supported our Army for decades, and we wouldn't be here without all of you. But we know the system that should benefit soldiers remains broken. Quality of life and battlefield advantage aren't always the #1 budget priority. It's a simple fact, and we need your help to continue to change it. We need right-to-repair legislation, relief from pre-World War II laws, and significantly more budget flexibility. Thank you so much for last year's progress, but if we're going to win the next fight, we must go even further. Technological change is accelerating, warfare is evolving, and speed is absolutely critical. Your help to either lower barriers to innovation or stick to the decades-long status quo makes all the difference. I invite all of you to come see our transformation firsthand. We are partnering with private industry to adopt the best tech, talent, and tradecraft. We're inviting those partners onto our bases to unlock dormant resources and offset federal budget delays. We are blazing a trail for our nation on nuclear energy, counter-drone capabilities, and military AI. Despite red tape, we're delivering better dining, barracks, Wi-Fi, and 3D printed barracks. Even though it can feel like the deck is sometimes stacked against us, the United States Army is a beacon of transformation. For instance, as we speak, we are hosting the largest hackathon in human history to retroactively jailbreak our siloed equipment. It's named Operation Jailbreak. Last month in Europe, soldiers showed me how our software systems are compartmentalized, isolated, and ineffective against modern threats. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Delta Common Operating System, their modular open system architecture command and control system, is absolutely incredible. It fully integrates every single drone, every sensor, and every shooting platform into just one single network. Ours does not. Unfortunately, for decades, our budget process incentivized companies to protect their intellectual property at all costs, creating walled gardens in our C2 architecture. And this has been the status quo for far too long. It is no longer acceptable, and industry is helping us solve it. I contacted 9 of our defense primes and other large partners who immediately agreed to send thousands of pieces of equipment, engineers, and scientists to Fort Carson. Together, we will force our way through the firewalls, link every system, and achieve true right to integrate. This is our first sprint, and we will do it again and again and again until we get it right. I want to be clear, this is a perfect example of the Army's potential for speed and innovation. Absolutely no one else has the talent, the drive, and the obsessive work ethic to pull this off so quickly. Operation Jailbreak is the first of many sprints to bypass red tape and bureaucracy. What we're doing in Colorado should be the standard operating procedure going forward. It's the iterative process that makes America's tech sector the very best in the world. But you would be amazed at the regulatory walls that stood in our way. And we've expended a sinful amount of energy just to do the right thing. Imagine what we can do if you continue to help us slash those restrictions. We can do more if you help us balance oversight with speed. We can maximize our budget if you help us partner with America's entrepreneurs. We can move faster if you help us shed obsolete equipment and invest in the future. And with your help, we can ensure our Army remains the dominant land fighting force for the next 250 years. Thank you so much for having us, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. General Leneve, you are recognized.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee today. The credibility of our Army is defined by what it's prepared to do, not what it intends to do. So every decision I make enables our soldiers to be more lethal and ready to fight and win and serve as the backbone of the joint force. In the Indo-Pacific, we're building a force posture to deter threats to U.S. national interest and designed to extend the operational reach and endurance of the joint force. Right now, 87,000 soldiers are campaigning throughout the region. Our Typhoon missile systems are forward deployed to the Philippines and Japan. We position LTAMs in Guam and IFPC unit in Korea, extending next-generation air and missile defense against current threats in the region. The 1st and 3rd multi-domain commands are now operational in the region, and this fall, the 4th multi-domain command headquarters will stand up at Fort Carson. Each multi-domain command brings together long-range fires, intelligence, electronic warfare, space, and cyber, all integrated into a single theater-level capability designed to support the Joint Force commanders across vast distances of the Pacific. Every one of these capabilities exists because of the investments this committee supported. In the Middle East, our forces continue to defend U.S. personnel and partners while sustaining layered air and missile defense, long-range strike capability, and operational logistics across CENTCOM. At home, we're preparing the force for future conflict at our combat training centers. It's where we train our soldiers to fight against an adversary in the mud, to solve complex problems, and to test our latest systems. But we cannot field modern kit while sustaining aging systems that consume time, money, and manpower. Divesting legacy platforms reduces the maintenance demand that falls hardest on our junior soldiers and frees resources to advance next-generation systems. That's why we restructured how we acquire, design, sustain, and field equipment with decisive focus on speed, the right to repair, and system modularity. That thinking is already reflected in some of our next-generation platforms, like the XM-30 infantry fighting vehicle, the M13E Abrams, and the MV-75 Cheyenne, which provides unprecedented speeds, range, and flexibility. Each of these systems are designed so that the next operational upgrade requires integration, not a brand new start. But none of this matters if we can't produce and sustain at scale. And that's why we continue to modernize the OIB through advanced manufacturing, depot modernization, and expanded partnerships with industry, including enhanced use leases that accelerate infrastructure development and production capability. And while the industrial capacity is important, the strength of our Army is only as strong as our ability to retain experienced soldiers and whether the force we're building reflects the standards we claim to uphold. That standard includes $4 billion in infrastructure investments throughout 2026, rolling out campus-style dining facilities, scaling our holistic health and fitness across the entire force. And soldiers are seeing the difference, and so do American citizens. Our recruiting numbers are soaring. We're on track to achieve this year's accession target ahead of schedule, because in the end, soldiers are the reason your Army can do what it does. Your Army delivers the intelligence and fires that enable maneuver. We sustain operations, we protect the force. We provide the command and control architecture that allows the joint force and America's allies to operate together. Every component of the fight, the joint fight, depends on our Army's ability to do all those things simultaneously and exceptionally well. We will not fail our country. This will defend. And thank you for your continued support as we sustain the best Army the world has ever known.
Well, thank you very much. And now we begin our round of questioning. So let me start with you, Secretary Driscoll. Operation Jailbreak involves the right to integrate. How many, this is brand new this month, is that right, Secretary Driscoll?
As of about a week ago.
All right,
Chairman.
okay. How many companies are involved at this point?
So we started, Chairman, with the 5 primes, Anduril, Palantir, L3 were the original. They have since been inviting other companies to come out. If I were estimating, I would guess 30 to 50 companies are currently involved by day 10. And what we have told industry is we will take every single piece of equipment that our Army uses. This is thousands of pieces of equipment, and all of them will be jailbroken, which just practically means all of them will be able to share information out of the system and receive information into the system. And what's so powerful about this is once you can do that to these pieces of equipment, and this is what we've learned from the Ukrainians, this is where you can start to layer in things like generative AI models to help you with decision-making.
Okay. How long have the Ukrainians been using this concept?
I would say the entire war.
Okay. Is it frustrating to you that now in the 5th year, we're just embracing this concept this month, May of 2026?
Chairman, I would look at myself and only myself that we haven't moved faster on it. I do think that what we have that the Ukrainians don't have is we have deep infrastructure, we have deep expertise, and the downside of a bureaucracy can also empower some upsides of a bureaucracy. And so what has been incredibly valuable for us, and I don't think respectfully the Ukrainians could have done it in 10 days, is we have basically the entire defense industrial base is now moving to this.
Have signed on.
They are actively shipping equipment, and we have scientists and computer engineers currently in Colorado making everything flow. And so I think what we will be able to do in 6 weeks will be unlike anything that could be done anywhere else in the world.
Okay, so in 6 weeks, you're going to have tangible results.
Unequivocally.
Most interesting. How fast is the Army moving to embrace low-cost munitions across portfolios? And when are we going to start moving faster?
Sure.
So both of you can answer that. Yeah,
Sure, we're
General.
tied in with the Deputy Secretary of War's, Munitions Council. We're moving as fast as we possibly can. I think the goal is to have a magazine depth that supports both low-cost munitions and our exquisite munitions, so we have the proper fit and the proper numbers that we think we're going to need in a future conflict.
And Chairman, I would say under Secretary of War and the President, we've spent the first 9 months of at least my time in the seat redoing a lot of the bureaucratic structures that existed with how we buy things, how we test things, and how we scale things. And there are some leading indicators to me that make me believe that we have made strong and lasting changes that will allow us to do this much more frequently. So if you look at the day 5 of the war, where we wanted to go get more interceptors for the Shahed drones, we were able to contract for 13,000 MIROPS and 10,000 Bumblebees within 5 days. Those were showing up in theater in packages of 1,000 or more, and we were able to flow soldiers in as a train-the-trainer model. And that, to me, is a massive success that shows me or makes me believe that all of the changes that had occurred earlier in the year are actually working and allowing us to be able to start to scale these lower-cost solutions.
Mr. Secretary, in 60 seconds, can you give us a quick overview of your role in what might happen in the Indo-Pacific with regard to the Army?
Absolutely. I think what we've seen in CENTCOM in the last couple of months is the Army has a huge role to play. We are the logistical backbone of what is occurring in the theater. We are able, with our long-range precision fires, to reach out and touch the enemy in ways that just the Army historically had not been able to. And then one of our superpowers as an Army is we can disperse quickly. And so whether it's on the air defense side or on the offensive side, the United States Army will play a huge role in whatever happens in the Indo-Pacific.
All right, I'll yield back. Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me commend you, Secretary Driscoll, because you not only sense the change in warfare, but you seized an opportunity and you're pushing through. Well done. Based on the experience in Ukraine, we understand fundamental changes are taking on, and I sort of characterize it, when I served in the military a few years ago, the mantra was shoot, move, and communicate. Today, it's communicate so you can shoot and move. And hackathon goes right to that principal issue. Well done. Let me ask another question, though. That's the military promotion board system is central to our military in every way, shape, and form. The law that we promulgated requires the selection boards use a comprehensive evaluation process to review an officer's entire record and select officers who are, quote, the best qualified for promotion and future service. It's based on the collective assessment and judgment of their peers throughout their OERs and also the senior officers on the board. Can you tell us why Secretary Hicks has directed that 5 names be withheld from the most recent Army one-star list concerning officers accused of no misconduct? And did you support or recommend the actions by the Secretary?
Ranking Member, the private conversations between me and Secretary of War, I'll never talk about those. I will say that the United States Army has always followed the rules and regulations around promotions board.
Well, I don't think there's a very clear role for the Secretary of Defense to take off individuals from the board. What other promotion boards have been subject to this review?
I'm sorry, Senator, would you mind repeating?
Secretary of Defense removed several names from a promotion board, which I think is highly unusual to be diplomatic. What other boards has he reviewed and with the intent perhaps of removing people from the board, from the recommendations?
Senator, as far as I know, no other names have been put on a different scroll.
So what incentivized the Secretary to look at this particular board?
I do not know, Senator.
Well, it's a question I think would be important to ask. Now, if these officers were judged by their peers and their superiors to be of, as statutorily required, best qualified promotion in future service, they've been denied immediate promotion. Would they still be eligible to go before another board?
As I understand it mechanistically, Senator, the scroll that was submitted to the Senate did not include these officers' names on it. Another scroll could be submitted either individually or with the collective 4 to the Senate for promotion as it stands
You
today.
actively reviewing the individual cases so that you can determine yourself that these individuals should be reconsidered for a board and promotion?
I can commit to you, Senator, and the entire committee that General Neve and I are advocating for American soldiers every single day, and we are constantly working to make sure that the Army is promoting the best.
My fear is that this is not something that's obscure, but it's very relevant to every officer and every person in the Army, and that they've seen literally a life's work suddenly terminated without explanation by the Secretary of Defense. That doesn't send a good message, I believe, to the forces. Let me raise a subject that is seldom considered here, quadrilline. As you know, Mr. Secretary, the Army is responsible for quadrilline, and as you also know, I suspect, the status here is terrible. Out-of-date radars, it's the major missile testing system for the Army, for the whole Department of Defense. Can you confirm that the Army is still in charge, and how are you going to remedy the poor situation?
Sure, we are. We still are the executive agent, and we're looking at ways to improve the infrastructure there. It's a critical component for testing, as you say, in the Pacific, and we're not walking away from it.
Thank you. In 30 seconds, General Neve, based on our experience in Ukraine, the observation we've conducted, how are you going to integrate that into the new combat vehicle systems? My sense is combat vehicles are very much vulnerable to drones and other systems, but can you respond?
No, sure, and thanks for the question. That's one of the key secret sauces in our new PAEs that the Secretary and team created, is to be able to use lessons learned and feed it into the acquisition process, get it out into soldiers' hands, test it, and then get the feedback back into the acquisition to be able to have a system that continually innovates for the future threat. So our lessons are being incorporated in all of our systems across the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
sir.
John.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Senator Ernst, I'm sorry. It's
Thank
right here
you.
in front of me.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Driscoll and General Linney, for being in front of our committee today and for your continued service to our nation. I do want to start with the Army Transformation Initiative, and I want to thank the ranking member for bringing up the dismissal of General Randy George, because Secretary Driscoll, when you first came into your position, I remember meeting with you, met with General George about the Army Transformation Initiative, which was long overdue. This committee has been very clear that we support the goal of a leaner and more lethal Army. And with the dismissal of Randy George, we also saw the dismissal of General Hodney, who is or was the U.S. Army Transformation and Training Command commander. So two very unfortunate dismissals at a time when we do need that leaner, more lethal Army. So as we look at this, we need to achieve electronic dominance. We need to get unmanned systems into every division, and we need to enable AI-driven command and control at the theater, corps, and division levels. So, Secretary Driscoll, can you provide an update on what tangible progress we are now making in the Army Transformation Initiative? And can you talk about some of the areas where we did, in the past several months, achieve greater capabilities within the Army because of the ATI?
Absolutely, Senator. I'm incredibly optimistic that the groundwork that we've laid in the last 10 to 16 months has allowed us to move more quickly as an Army. We've been able to do new starts on an M1E3, a new version of a tank, the Flora long-range helicopter has gotten a lot of investment and focus. Our next-gen C2 has expanded the number of divisions, and we were able to do that much more quickly than we were originally able to. And part of that is because of the hard decisions that we made on where to cut spending. It is very hard once a system and a program get up to be able to stop the spending in the future, because all sorts of different reasons make it where that momentum is pretty difficult. And I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for supporting us. We saved about $48 billion, we think, over the 5-year period that we've been able to reinvest into our transformation. And then the last bit I'll say is a lot of it has been systematic changes. So when we look at what we did, converting over our PEOs to PAEs, essentially what we did is we took 13 silos of decision making, and within that silo, you'd have 15 different stops between when we wanted to buy something and when we actually could purchase it, and any of those stops could kick it back to the beginning. And so for acquisition decisions, some of the times it would take between 2 and 4 years to get something we knew we wanted into the hands of soldiers. By the time we actually got it there, it was already outdated. We've been able to collapse those systems down and do much more like what occurs in the commercial sector, where we're doing the equivalent of putting our engineers with our manufacturers and our accountants and our lawyers all on one team. And so an example of when we've been able to move very quickly, where I don't think we could have pre-ATI, is getting the MIROPS and the Bumblebee into the CENTCOM. From day 5, we decided we needed it. By day 10, we had contracted for 23,000, and by day 20, they were starting to flow into theater.
That's really good. And I do hope the other service branches take a look at what the Army has been able to achieve and find a way forward in their own service branches, because this is pretty exemplary. And then as we're looking ahead, what are the next major phases in this initiative? And where do you see that we are assuming the greatest risk as we're executing?
Ma'am, thanks for the question. You touched on it. So, we spent a lot of time in the beginning of Army transformation looking at division and below, at the tactical level. You hit it spot on in your opening question. We're taking a hard look now at corps, Army Service Component Commands, and what we have to change inside of those organizations to take on more of a role in how we're going to have to fight in the future. And that's a lens that we're taking a look at right now.
That's
Thank you.
wonderful. Yes.
And Senator,
Secretary.
I'd say the biggest risk is not going fast enough. Next Gen C2, we think it will be in all the divisions, or we're modeling it to be in all the divisions within 5 years. I don't think that's sufficient. I think we need to do it in 2 or 3.
Yeah.
It is just simply a spending pacing item at this point because we know what we need to do.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. There's a vote going on now on the floor, actually a series of 2 votes. We will continue our hearing during the vote, and I'll be leaving, and I think Senator Budd will take the gavel for about 5 minutes. At this point, I call on Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to both of you. Secretary Driscoll, I want to ask you about your approach to the negotiations involving Hawaii's military training lands consisting of some 29,000 acres. I understand the importance of these training lands for Army readiness and Indo-Pacific deterrence. I also understand the importance of this land and these negotiations to the people of Hawaii and the Native Hawaiian community, and that is why I have been engaging with DoD leaders about how these negotiations will proceed, expressing the need for community input for a number of years now. And at your confirmation hearing and again at last year's posture hearing, you committed to negotiating in good faith with the state and the community. So it was concerning that instead of what I would consider open communication and transparency, the Army last year pursued unilateral condemnation language as shown by your attempt to add last-minute NDA language to support condemnation. And Congress responded by instead reinforcing the continuing need for good faith negotiations. A unilateral decision to condemn state lands would bypass the community, the state government, and the congressional delegation. The relevant condemnation statute, in fact, requires the Army to pursue and exhaust all other available options before starting condemnation proceedings. So I don't see how the Army can meet that requirement when it has not even resubmitted corrected EISs to address the deficiencies noted by the Board of Land and Natural Resources, which in May led to their disapproval of the Army submitted EISs. It's been a year. So given these actions, appears that, I hope this isn't the case, that the Army is trying to run the clock and leave unilateral condemnation as the only viable course of action. And I want to state again for the record that I oppose unilateral condemnation. What we need is a negotiated approach to these lands. And I've taken that position for years, and we're now at the point where the leases are almost up, and final negotiations need to occur with meaningful community engagement and input, especially from the Native Hawaiian community. So Secretary Driscoll, I have a number of questions about your plans going forward. You previously committed to negotiating in good faith. Do you still stand by that commitment?
Yes, unequivocally.
The Army EISs were rejected by the Hawaii Land Board last summer because of several noted deficiencies, including their failure to adequately assess the cultural and historical impacts of continued training. Mr. Secretary, can I get your commitment that the Army will resubmit their EISs to address these deficiencies?
Senator, just to the spirit of the question, I try to always say this, and I mean it very sincerely. When you talk to our soldiers and their families who spend a lot of their lives on the Hawaiian Islands, they are incredibly grateful to the community. The community has been fantastic to them over decades, and so we want to be very respectful of the deep relationship that those people have with the land. And so I commit to following up with your office.
And I hope that means that you will be resubmitting your EISs, because to me, resubmitting the EISs is part of what even the condemnation statutes requires you to do, which is to exhaust all avenues. That means negotiations. Next question, what is the status of your negotiations with the state of Hawaii? And can you describe in detail what steps you plan to take in the next 60 days? The time is running on these leases to advance a negotiated agreement with the state.
Senator, we've aspired over the years before I was even in the seat. I think we've had a number of meetings, and then since I've been here, I can speak more articulately to that. We've engaged with the delegation, both who represent here in D.C., but then we've had a lot of conversations with state leadership, and what we've tried to do is balance out fairness to the local population with this idea and this commitment from me that we, the United States Army, must maintain this land. We need it for our training. We need it to be ready for the Indo-Pacific. And with the timeline that you were referencing coming up very, very, very soon,
Well, frankly, the negotiations must occur with the state of Hawaii because the lease is with the state. That means negotiating with the governor, basically. So those need to proceed in good faith, as I would call it. And so I want to urge you again to resume, if they have been a pause, resume these good faith negotiations because that's what it's going to take for us to come to a resolution that is going to be fair to all parties, and that certainly includes with the input of the Native Hawaiian community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize myself. Good to see you both. Great to see a North Carolinian here. Thank you both for your service. General Neve, I was proud to see the Army's request of 2,400 infantry squad vehicles, or the ISVs, in this year's budget request. So I think that's the right step to modernize the squad vehicles and increase survivability. They're very impressive. We even saw them in western North Carolina as the 18th Airborne Corps was out there for Hurricane Helene, and I appreciate their work there. So what are some of your thoughts on multi-year procurement for that platform, and also expanding procurement of the ISV Heavy?
Yeah, sure. I support multi-year contracts. I mean, it helps us, you know, in the bargaining process. It helps us in the, you know, full procurement of it. The Heavy version is going to be able to provide us the ability to also generate power on the battlefield that we're going to need to have that's running our command and control centers and some of our advanced weapon systems. It's a critical platform that we're going to need as well, and look forward to having that compete, you know, in the next rounds.
Well, thank you for that. I look at multi-year as being a great way to take better advantage of taxpayer dollars and use it more efficiently. I mean, if you're doing one-year contracts, it seems kind of risky to the producer, and we can drive down the cost per unit. If it's aircraft for the other branches or yourselves or ISVs, I think it's a smart way to go forward. Did you have a comment on that, Secretary?
Yes, Senator. And the ISV is actually a success story in a lot of different ways, particularly for North Carolina with Hendricks Automotive, a racing company. And one of the things is we were converting over the ISV, which is 80% a Chevy Colorado, into what is now a very powerful, beloved military vehicle. Is the rapid iteration of our soldiers being able to test the versions, and then this automotive racing company being able to make changes in near real time is what got that vehicle from off the drawing board into the hands of soldiers. And it is truly one of the beacons of transformation that we use for all the rest of the products that we're working on, is we say, we need you to be more like Hendricks Automotive.
It's certainly a great model. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Another question. I know you've been laser focused on applying lessons learned from Ukraine to the Army Transformation Initiative. One lesson that I've learned is that small UAS, small drones, they need to be able to operate in a GPS-denied environment, sometimes with its own counter-droning technology on board. So what's the Army doing on this front? And I'll start with you, Mr. Secretary.
You're absolutely right, Senator. This is the future of not only warfare, but just more generally how humans inflict violence on each other. This is a risk at our stadiums, our arenas, our ports, our borders, and not just our for our nation, but every nation all at once. As we have the World Cup coming up, the President and Secretary of War have been very focused on partnering with the rest of the federal government to counter these exact problems. And so what we, the United States Army, are doing is we have formed JIADA, or we are the lead to JIADA 401, the nation's preeminent counter-drone joint task force. And in that, we are testing all sorts of drones in all sorts of environments. And we are working with our federal partners to create training lands where we can do all of the things you're talking about with electronic warfare. Because one of the problems we as the nation have is, and it's kind of more of an upside than a downside, but we're not actually in a war environment. And we just don't want to take the same level of risk for training and testing as you might do perhaps in Ukraine or in CENTCOM right now. And so we are actively building out those ranges on behalf of the government.
Understood. Another question, Mr. Secretary. The 18th Airborne Corps has uncovered some valuable lessons in Scarlet Dragon with the technology testing, one of which is the need for AI-enabled predictive logistics software. So what's the Army doing to prioritize contested logistics capabilities, specifically for a fight over long distances like in the Western Pacific?
We were talking about Operation Jailbreak, where we're physically breaking down these pieces of equipment so information can flow. A parallel exercise that has been going on is in our business systems. I think it was about a year and a half ago, we had over 600 business systems, and many of them didn't exchange information. We have collapsed those down to 200, which any business owner would still be horrified at the idea of 200 business systems. We are pushing them down to hopefully land in the teens, where all of them will be able to exchange information. And that, once we break down those data silos, that's where we can start to layer in agentic solutions to help us with planning for the contested Indo-Pacific environment.
Well, appreciate both of your work. You're headed in a great direction. Thank you. I now recognize Senator King.
Thank you very much, Mr. Acting Chairman. I thought for a moment you and I could take over the committee. I appreciate the recognition. Mr. Chairman, I want to reiterate a point that is, I think, very significant. For the first time in my experience on this committee, we are putting 25% of the defense budget out of the bipartisan process. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned I tried to get the exact words, the Army budget is a bipartisan project. And 15% of this budget is in so-called mandatory spending, a term I've never seen before in this context, which is basically reconciliation, which is by definition a partisan project. In terms of the entire defense budget, the Golden Dome project, for example, is in this new category that's outside of the bipartisan process, both here in this committee and in the Appropriations Committee. I think that's a very dangerous precedent that's being set because basically it is deciding that a significant part of the defense budget shall be off limits to the minority party, whichever it may be at a particular time. This is a significant change in our budgetary process that, Mr. Chairman, I think we should really have a serious look at. I don't view this as a partisan issue. I view this as a institutional issue, and we are basically ceding, in this case, 25% of our budgetary authority that's outside, as I say, the authority of this committee and the Appropriations Committee. Mr. Secretary, I'm a little unsure about the Operation Jailbreak. By the way, I compliment you on the impulse for this. I think it's absolutely essential. But you keep talking about integration and data silos. That's not right to repair. Please, what are we actually talking about here? Are we talking about getting the IP that will enable us to repair? Because I believe for years that we should be buying that IP every time we buy a platform. But it sounds like Operation Jailbreak is more about data sharing than it is the IP on right to repair these weapon systems.
You're exactly right, Senator. So it is separate and distinct, slightly related to why it's important to us. But we're calling it right to integrate. And so fundamentally what we are requiring is each and every system that we use that creates data needs to create an API or an SDK, a software development kit, so that it can push information outside that closed system, and we can send it over a network to our, we're starting with Anduril's Lattice platform for command and control, but basically what we are requiring, we are retroactively going back and creating these APIs and SDKs, and we are proactively requiring any new piece of equipment that we buy to be able to share information and receive information so we can control
I get
everything.
that, and I think that's salutary, and that's one of the lessons from Ukraine, I think, is in vastly increasing the speed on command and control. But right to repair is a separate issue, and in my view, every Army depot, every Navy ship, every Air Force hangar should have a 3D printer. we should not have, we have a readiness problem, as you well know, on all of these complicated machines, whether it's an airplane, a ship, or a weapon system. And we shouldn't be waiting for a valve from the manufacturer. And I hope that you'll push in the procurement process for buying the IP so that we can print our own parts or get our own parts in the market and not be held up by the proprietary nature of the IP on these complicated weapon systems. Are you with me on that?
Yes, Senator. Right to repair, why it is, there are a couple of reasons that make it more important now than ever. One of the reasons is if our pacing threat is in the Indo-Pacific and we're worried about contested logistics, for many and most of the parts, we need to be able to manufacture them on site or nearly on site. And with the increase in advanced manufacturing that's been going on, we're actually at a place that we can do that. And so what we, the Army, are doing is through our Vantage platform, we are scanning in a lot of these parts that break often. We are putting in the digital design file, and what that is doing for soldiers is it's actually allowing them to access a nearby advanced manufacturing platform or a 3D printer and print these parts. And so like the 101st Airborne had 80% of its 777s down, and many of them were for a part that had ended up we could 3D print for $8. And so we have since fixed
If
that.
Delta Airlines had that availability, they'd be out of business.
Yes.
So I hope that you'll also talk to your procurement folks to be sure this is a part of the acquisition process, that we're buying not only the object, but we're buying the IP so that we can maintain the object ourselves. So I commend you for this, but don't stop with integrating software. Let's keep going on the repair itself.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I add my commendation. I would only say that right to repair is easier said than done, and it involves intellectual property. And I wish everyone the best who's trying to negotiate this, because it's a sticky wicket. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. Thank you both for your service. Thanks for being here. To the extent that you can in this setting, could you give me your assessment of how the Ukrainians are doing against the Russians? I think there is a false narrative that the Russians are winning. In fact, the contrary seems to be true, at least in certain parts of the battlefield. Certainly the Ukrainians, I think, are capable of prevailing if they have sufficient support from us. What's your assessment?
Senator, I talk to the Ukrainians reasonably frequently, and definitely through SACU. The United States Army has had a presence helping Ukraine since day one. A lot of our leaders have developed very long-term relationships, and it's been a two-way street. We have learned an enormous amount from them. When I talk about Operation Jailbreak, that was because 2 weeks ago we were in Germany running a joint exercise, and the Ukrainians actually sent some of their most talented people to help us learn how they would do the fight, and it was in that instance that we learned this. But then on our side, we are able to see and help with a lot of their intelligence gathering, and I think what we are seeing is the Russians' loss of Starlink has set them back pretty meaningfully. They have probably since regathered the momentum. The Ukrainians have done an incredible job of starting to innovate to larger Group 2, Group 3, and Group 4 drones, which is what we're seeing where they're able to reach further into Russia to cause damage. I think the quick summary would be what we expect as a United States Army when we look at the conflict is continued kind of grinding, slow success in either direction, with neither side likely able to break through in the next 18 months.
General? Yeah, sir, I concur completely with the Secretary. As I said in the earlier session, I ran the training program, for a year. Early on was eye-opening to see how long that they could hold on and what they've been able to do up to this point. But I concur with the Secretary's assessment.
And do we have munitions that we can provide to them that would be useful to them? They're buying them. We don't have to pay for them.
Senator, I think we'd prefer to answer that in a closed setting.
Let me ask you, in terms of our defense industrial base, again, to the extent you can talk about it in this setting. I think there is a feeling long-term, over years, that we've failed to make our defense production as nimble and agile. The Ukrainians certainly have demonstrated both agility and nimbleness. I've seen them on my 9 trips to Ukraine, visiting the drone factories, how they actually make changes to their products on the assembly line in real time as they receive information from the front. We have nothing like that agility or nimbleness. Can you talk about what the Department of Defense should be doing to make our defense contractors more responsive to the needs of our military?
So I can speak to the first part about our industrial base, or our Army's 23 plus depots. We've taken a hard look at a ways across the board to invest in this for long term, whether it's advanced manufacturing, it's land use agreements, it's bringing in private public partnerships in at each of the different sites in order to get our industrial base up to a footing that we know that we're going to need them at to be able to produce at scale, whether that's parts for drones or parts for our equipment, both in the fleet that we have now and the fleet that we're going to look to procure in the future. The Secretary has pushed us to ensure that we have the ability to be able to utilize our organic base in the equipment that we're going after into the future. I think the department writ large sees the same issues that that we all acknowledge in a workforce that in sites that haven't been fully invested in over decades.
And Senator, I would just echo what General Leneve is saying with, we believe a one-time, and you all have to balance the preferences of your constituents much more than we do. We are more narrowly focused on soldiers and their family and lethality, but we believe the 27 budget would give us the one-time spending to increase a lot of our abilities and capabilities on the OIB, which would make our country a lot safer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott.
Thanks, both of you, for being here. So, Secretary, I have 3 things. The first is Orlando. You've got the Army's program executive office for simulation, training, instrumentation. So, located in Orlando. What's going on? Are you going to make it a lot bigger? So, just tell me what do you think is going to be happening there? I was governor, and we put a lot of money into the simulation program. It's a big, the big opportunity, whichever one wants to answer it. But our goal is to do whatever we can, of course, to grow it. But you have to do what's best for the Army.
Sure, our simulation, center there is incredible. It's going to continue to be very, very important as we move forward with our modernization program. We are not, stepping away from the incredible capability that we have there, especially what it provides to our combat training centers. Provides inside of our warfighting exercises that we execute at brigade and all the way up to corps level. There's a critical component in there that helps us to continue to modernize that program.
And Senator, what I would say is simulation is more important than ever. The ability to take data from the battlefield, whether it's in CENTCOM or what we can get out of Ukraine, and to feed that into the system to learn, and not just for the human learning, but to train our counter-drone models, to train our drone models. As these agentic solutions start to flow, data and simulation will matter more than ever. And so if I was guessing kind of as a directional guidance to a space, I would imagine that vertical grows over time.
Sure. So, Secretary, drones, and you've talked about it a little bit. So we had a speaker at one of our lunches the other day that said that Ukraine is building 5 million drones a year, and said, doesn't mean this is accurate, but said that our military will add 100 to 150,000 drones a year. So what do we need? How fast can we get there? Because clearly it sure appears that then going forward, drones are going to become more significant, right? And it actually is way safer for our military, our men and women. So can you just talk about where you want to get, How are we doing?
Absolutely, Senator. Drones will be a core part of future combat, and no matter where you go. I think what we as a nation need to do is create the mechanisms and the tools to be able to scale when we need to. We don't need 5 million drones a year right now, nor would we want them, because they will get outdated likely well before we need them. But we need to be ready to scale and have a plan and have the resilience in the supply chain and know where we're going in that moment. And so what we are doing is, as an Army, starting to slowly flex the muscle. And so we should have some of the first brushless motors rolling off our manufacturing lines that we, the Army, are owning. We don't expect to supply the entire industry brushless motors, but we think it is so important for future warfare that we need to do that on our depots and our arsenals. And so what we are working on now and owe back to this committee is a more fulsome plan of how we are looking at the entire drone ecosystem and where we think we need to have redundancy and overinvestment.
That makes sense. And then you think, and then with the ability to ramp up if we need.
Unequivocally, yes.
Yep. So you've had the job for a little while. What are you most proud of? What do you feel good about that you're getting done?
This sounds like a unnecessarily flattering remark to all of you and to the American soldiers, but the vast majority of people I interact with every single day want to make our country safer. They want to innovate. The American soldier, having spent time out of uniform at fancy schools and working at fancy firms, I would bet on them 100% of the time to solve a difficult problem. And so I guess now 18 months in, I am significantly more optimistic that all of these massive challenges and this inflection point that is occurring all over the world all at once, that we're going to win, that we will do it with whatever resources you give us, and that the American soldier will come out the other end even more lethal, more ferocious, and hopefully less likely to be needed, because every adversary will know that they will lose that fight. And 18 months in, I can say I'm more positive than when I started.
Great. Are both of you confident that you're continuing to get the best leaders around you to be able to make sure we have the most lethal force?
I am 100% confident, sir.
I would say the Army, from my mere 3.5 years in, and then getting to see it from a different vantage point, its superpower is that it creates incredible leaders at all levels of echelon. And I would have absolutely no doubt that if you took out 50 at any given point, we could replace them immediately, and the Army would go rolling along like it has for 250 years.
Thanks. Thanks, both of you.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We need a military right to repair law. Got an example today, and that is Black Hawk helicopters. There's a tiny knob that pilots need to scroll through for information, and every month, about 4 of them break. The Army could replace them for about $15, but because the Army does not have right to repair, the whole helicopter goes offline, and the contractor charges $47,000 to replace the entire screen. Let that sink in. $15 or $47,000. Now, Secretary Driscoll, you and other military leaders have repeatedly said that Congress needs to pass the right to repair law. And last year, both the House and the Senate passed reforms. But the big defense contractors, lobbyists, killed it behind closed doors. So let's talk out in the open about what those lobbyists are claiming. Let's just get it out here. Number one, they say contractors can't hand over their intellectual property and data because the Army would steal it. Secretary Driscoll, what do you say to big contractors that claim the Army can't be trusted with sensitive data?
Senator, I would say one of the more preposterous things I've heard in the last 18 months.
But you have heard it.
I have heard it often, is that we, the United States Army, would take this data and do something nefarious at worst, or at perhaps best, from a moral perspective, we would haphazardly handle it. The United States Army and the Pentagon in particular are exceptionally good at handling sensitive data, and we have incredible processes in place, I would say more so than any other organization. And so my reply is, and has always been, we don't want to take any data, we just want to purchase it.
Okay, so let's do another one. Big contractors claim that DOD doesn't need right to repair reforms because you already have all of the authority you need to access technical data for repairs. Now, it turns out when you look at that existing legal authority, it explicitly says that technical data, quote, does not include computer software. Secretary Driscoll, it's 2026. Most weapons run on software. If the Army can't use software to repair its own equipment and weapons, is that a problem for readiness?
Unequivocally, yes.
Yeah. So in fact, for example, the Army is already unable to repair the Avenger air defense system because it doesn't have the software it needs. So right to repair must include software. Let's do one more. Big contractors have floated the idea of, quote, data as a service, which is really just code for pay-per-view. It means that the department is, quote, metered and billed every single time they access materials. And it's pretty easy to see how costs would add up in those circumstances, since one contractor is already charging the Air Force $900 a page for upgrades to its maintenance manuals. Secretary Driscoll, aside from the cost of pay-per-view, what happens if the Army is trying to repair a piece of broken equipment in a remote area and it has to keep messaging the contractor to get access to the manual?
Senator, this is what happens frequently, whether the specifics are true today or it's directionally true. Directionally, our soldiers struggle mightily to keep a lot of our equipment online, and this is not in a moment of conflict. That could be the decisive point between us being successful somewhere 6,000 miles away in the Indo-Pacific or failing our mission if we can't repair our own equipment.
Yeah. You know, it is a reminder, we've got to have this access. And I just want to say this business of data as a service is just one more attempt to try to gouge American taxpayers and put our service members at risk. Last question, Secretary Driscoll. Does the Army need Congress to pass right to repair reforms in this year's National Defense Authorization Act, or should we let the big contractors kill it once again behind closed doors? What do you think here? This one is known as low and slow over the plate.
Yes. This is one of the most important things, and I don't say this to be over the top. I'm not intending to play into the set of questions. We, the United States Army, and we, the broader military, must maintain the right to be able to take advantage of all of the new tools, because if we don't, our adversaries will, and we will be put at a meaningfully worse position.
Yeah. Well, I very much appreciate the job you're trying to do. General, I'm sorry I didn't get to ask you the same set of questions, but I got a tough chairman who shuts me down when I go over.
She's 15 seconds over, and I'm pretty hot about it.
Exactly, I can tell. But I really do appreciate all you're trying to do. We need to help you out with getting right to repair through this year.
There will be an opportunity, of course, for a second round and questions for the record also. Senator Sullivan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to commend Senator Warren on her great work on right to repair. It's very bipartisan. Get that over the goal line. Thanks for your leadership on that. Mr. Secretary General, good to see you both. Thanks for your visit to Alaska. I heard it went well. I want to talk about some Alaska issues. I appreciate that. Sorry I wasn't there to show you around, but I thank you for that. I don't thank you for stealing one of my top staffers, though, who's sitting behind you, but I will forgive you. It's for the betterment of America, I guess, that I had to lose Jimmy, who's done a great job. I'm sure he's doing a great job for you. A couple things I wanted to talk about. Fort Greely, you know, the USAPAC commander was just out there this past weekend. The 49th Missile Defense Battalion does a great job with regard to missile defense for America. What was your assessment when you're out there? One thing that frustrates me is that we have, 20 empty silos out there still. We need more missiles in those silos. That's, I'm sure you know the motto of the 49th Missile Defense Battalion, the 300 protecting the 300 million. They're literally modern-day Spartans. Do you have any sense on that and when we can accelerate more missile defense at Fort Greely? General, Mr. Secretary, either of you?
Yes, sir. We're tied in with the team that's looking at that. I can't give you a sense of, how fast those are going to be, more assets moved there. I can tell you how critical that site is, for all of our defense.
Yeah, maybe a cue for if you can give me more details on that. We need to accelerate more ground-based missile interceptors there. I think it's just a no-brainer. I spent the weekend in Fairbanks, Alaska, at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Fairbanks Military Appreciation Dinner. Major General Cogbill was there, the 11th Airborne Division commander. By the way, the morale there seems very high. They were whipping every other Army unit in these competitions. The general and his sergeant major went through all these things the 11th Airborne's doing. No offense to the 82nd, but there's some good competition going on right now. And I'm very proud of that unit. One of the first things I did as a brand new senator, I was here only a couple weeks, and the Obama administration was going to cut 40,000 additional active duty troops. This is in 2015, which they did, and they were going to get rid of the 425, the only airborne brigade combat team in the entire Indo-Pacific. I fought like crazy as a new senator to stop that, which I did, put a hold on everybody in the Army's system until we got them to relinquish cutting the 425. And now the 425 is, as you know, part of the 11th Airborne. The 17 additional helos, my understanding, are coming to the 11th Airborne Division. Can you give me an update on that? And then some of the good work that's being done with regard to drones. You may have seen the University of Alaska Fairbanks just had a partnership with DIU on the drone capabilities that we have at the university. And if you can give me an update both on the helos coming to Fort Wainwright as part of the 11th Airborne Division and the work that we want to scale up that the 11th Airborne's doing on drone software and other capabilities. And then as you answer that, because I want to be respectful, Mr. Secretary, one thing I want to make sure we do, maybe in a phone call, I'm sorry we didn't get to meet before this. There was a memo on the 8A contracting awards that came out from some DAS in the Army. It looks like it goes against previous commitments that senior Army leadership made with regard to me. So I'd like offline to talk about that. This memo is causing a heck of a lot of confusion, and I think it's misguided.
45 seconds.
But so with that, I'll follow up with you, Mr. Secretary. Can you talk about the 11th Airborne there, General, and the issues that I raised, and the great job they're doing?
No, sure. First off, thanks for the support of getting the 11th across the goal line. My daughter served in 125, so bringing both of those units together under one division command, it brings about the esprit de corps and the morale that you're seeing across that division right now. We got great leadership up there. So there's a lot of good going on inside the division right now, especially with what they're doing with drone experimentations. We'll take all those lessons learned, especially what we're learning about just surviving in the winter up there.
Cold winter.
Yes, sir. And what we got to do across the goal line. I mean, you take a look at batteries alone. We're going to learn a lot from how quickly the cold takes a battery down. Is the same thing that's going to happen in the heat, when we're in the jungle. So we are learning a lot across the board. And there, we are moving the helicopter, sir. That's part of the aviation transformation. There's some that are coming out of, further reaches in the Pacific, and that will come back into Alaska to fully field the aviation brigade up there. We haven't walked back from that, and that's moving as fast as possible.
Thank you, General. And you can supplement your answer for the record. Appreciate your testimony in that regard. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome to the hearing here today. Secretary Driscoll, as you experienced last summer when you were up in Michigan, sorry I wasn't able to join you. I was out of the country during that time, but I know you enjoyed seeing Exercise Northern Strike in operation, and the thousands of troops, both U.S. allies and partner service members from over 20 countries were at that National All-Domain Warfighting Center. And as you know, the center is comprised of about 148,000 acres of training space at Camp Grayling and 17,000 square miles of special use military airspace at the Alpena Combat Readiness Training Center. It's an incredible place to do very advanced and sophisticated training. And in recognition of this unparalleled training environment, the department recently designated it as a national range for uncrewed aerial systems training as well. So my question is, with this new designation, how is the Army leveraging exercises like Northern Strike for realistic drone and counter-drone warfare? And are you exploring greater Army involvement at the National All-Domain Warfighting Center in Michigan to leverage these unique capabilities for new uncrewed range designations?
Senator, Camp Grayling is an incredible asset our nation, I think, has underutilized for the last couple of decades. The amount of airspace that we have there to test and to train is unmatched or nearly unmatched in all the places I've gone. What we must do as a nation is continue to get a lot of flight data, and we have to get learnings that can be fed into systems. And Camp Grayling is at the top of our list to expand our presence there. And then if you think about the manufacturing capabilities of Detroit in particular, when we were there, what they were capable of doing with drones and having created a drone corridor for training and testing for a lot of commercial companies, it is the exact type of place where we, the Army, want to grow our presence, because what we have learned is we can nearly never be the cutting edge of these technologies. They just move too fast. And so we want our soldiers co-located with venture-backed startups and venture-backed founders so that they can both get the excitement, but also the forward edge of what's possible. And we found that at Camp Grayling and in the rest of Michigan.
Well, great. We'll look forward to continuing to work with you to expand that, and appreciate your comments. Secretary Driscoll, this committee has consistently prioritized environmental stewardship through the bipartisan national defense bills by tackling PFAS contamination and prioritizing environmental cleanup. So to bring back Camp Grayling into the discussion, I have concerns about conflicting and inconsistent comments by the administration regarding the importance of environmental stewardship, despite the strong support from this committee and others. And I'm particularly troubled about what this means for PFAS cleanup at installations like Camp Grayling, which you just mentioned, which is an amazing facility, but clearly has some issues that we need to deal with, particularly with those local communities. So with that in mind, do I have your commitment to prioritize environmental programs to include the PFAS cleanup at installations like Camp Grayling in Michigan, as well as across country? But if you could talk about Camp Grayling specifically, I certainly would appreciate it.
Senator, very broadly, you definitely have the Army's commitment to be good stewards in the communities where we live. We aspire to be very thoughtful and almost like the Boy Scouts, where we leave the areas we train and live better than when we found them. And so very broadly, you have that commitment. And then specifically, I'll follow back up with your office on PFAS at Camp Grayling.
Great. I appreciate that. This is really to both of you. The Army, as you both know, conducts critical work to design, test, and engineer the next generation of ground combat systems in Michigan at the Detroit Arsenal, to include Ground Vehicle System Center, which is GVSC. But despite the critical work that they're doing, I'm concerned about workforce changes that included reassignment of personnel, the removal of collective bargaining rights of employees at the Arsenal. And I'm troubled that these employees at the Arsenal will no longer have the right to bargain for fair wages, for job security, and for a dignified retirement, quite frankly. So I hope I have both of your commitment to look seriously into these issues and ensure that the changes are not going to harm the technical teams that are there and risk overburdening what are really highly specialized and a valuable workforce. If you want to comment generally about that, but certainly would have, I don't know how familiar you are with what's happening at the Detroit Arsenal, but if you could talk about that, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, sir, you do have, I speak for myself, I speak for the Secretary as well, that our commitment, as we look at our human capital at all of our key infrastructure, that we're doing it with dignity and care as we try to balance where the workforce is across our base.
Secretary?
Thank you.
We'll follow up more. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Senator Sheehy.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. Secretary, I'd like to talk a little bit about how critical it is for our warfighters to be able to repair and maintain their own equipment, especially in forward deployed areas, and how important it is for combatant commanders and commanders who are closest to the fight to have the flexibility, the authority, and the funding to not just acquire the equipment that they need quickly, but then sustain, maintain, and in some cases modify that equipment for the needs of the battlefield. The 21st century battlefield moves quickly. Software and electronic warfare and spectrum landscape changes constantly, and sometimes the design of a device or the architecture of a software program may look great in a test range or in a lab, but when it hits the realities of combat, it requires modification, and sometimes those modifications can take years. So what is the department doing to resolve this, and what can we do on the Hill in a bipartisan manner to make sure we're giving you and the warfighters the tools to get that done?
Senator, you are absolutely right. Warfare has changed so dramatically that one of the few things I can guarantee is when we go into a large-scale conflict, within days, minutes, or hours, we will know where we need to change our equipment and our tools and our TTPs, and we will have to start to act quickly. And so we, the United States Army, are not Ukraine. We have more assets. We have a deeper defense industrial base. We have many tools and resources at our disposal that make it so that we can fight differently. But the thing we must do, like the Ukrainians, and we must do like armies all over the world, is we must be able to adapt quickly. And so what we've done is we have redone how we purchase things. So we've changed our acquisition structure to where we are using a model we call transformation and contact, where our soldiers are getting to test in the field our devices in advance, and they are helping us work with the manufacturers and the software developers before they even get the first real purchase to get it closer to where we know we will need it to be. And then the other things that we are doing is we are working with you and all of your colleagues to do things like get statutorily require that we always have our right to repair, that we always have a right to integrate. And what we mean by that is we must have the design files for the parts and the pieces where when we're 6,000 miles from home, we must be able to manufacture those changes, or manufacture those pieces ourselves. And then for right to integrate, what we're doing there is we're basically requiring every piece of equipment to be open through an API or an SDK so we can feed data out and feed data in. And what that does is it will stop us from having to swivel chair between 6 to 8 systems, which is what happens right now when you go to SAG-U and see how our Army is interacting with the Ukrainians. We have 6 to 8 systems that we're using. When you engage with the Ukrainians, they basically have 1 or 2 systems at most, and that is what we're doing as Army to get ready.
Hey, sir, if I may, one, we appreciate your support on right to repair. It's critical for us. One, our industrial base can't keep up with our enduring systems right now, so we got to have the ability to make our own parts and fix our equipment, and it's going to be demonstratively harder to do that in a Pacific theater, and we got to be able to do this at the edge. You give it to the soldiers, they will fix our stuff immediately fast.
Well, I agree, and we'll keep working on it. Second is air defense. So the wars you and I and all of us fought in, we didn't really have to worry about air-to-ground threats from our adversary. However, as we've learned here in the past few years, really since ISIS, with the drone threat, of course, now we're seeing it even more so with our fight against Iran, is our ability to protect ourselves from airborne threats. We've done fantastically well at intercepting threats, whether it be missiles, drones, or otherwise. But we also have a legacy air defense model built largely on active radars and active sensing, and that can present a serious vulnerability for us with a peer-peer fight with China or someone else. What is the Army doing, and what can we do further to develop passive sensing so we're not emitting locations for our air defense forces, and whether that's terrestrial-based or space-based, but what does that look like right now for the Army?
Sure. Yes, across the board. I mean, it's a layered defense, and we are going after everything to be able to protect our soldiers, and really the joint force. It's what we do as part of the joint force. So whether it's new systems that we're pushing as fast as we can in the CENTCOM to learn how they're being operated and the success that they're having there, or going after space-based, technology to help us to defeat what was going to be a much larger scale of these systems if we're going against a near peer. So yes to everything that you just said we have to go after for our layered defense.
And Senator, we're kicking off on Thursday a DCI, Defensive Critical Infrastructure meeting down at Fort Bragg, and we've invited in a host of participants, so power companies, utilities, water, and what we are doing there is we are hoping to build a blueprint for how to defend ourselves both in CONUS and then export those lessons to OCONUS. But things like acoustic passive sensors, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, they are getting an incredible amount of value out of that, and we are just underinvested in it right now.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. Ready to lead the way.
Senator Sheehy. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for both the closed setting and this one. Really good information. Secretary Driscoll, I have two topics that I would like to raise with you. Despite a Pentagon budget request that would increase the top line by 50% if you include both components, and despite the fact that that top line increase produces significant and I think well-merited pay raises for our troops, there's no pay raise for the civilian workforce. There's a bonus pool, but there's no guaranteed pay raise for the civilian workforce. About a quarter of the Army, component is civilian. A huge portion of that civilian workforce in the Army and the other branches are veterans. So they've already served in an active capacity, and now they're civilians. And I'm very troubled by the absence of a pay increase proposal in the president's budget. I'm not going to ask you to justify, because I know the way budgets get done. Often we ask for things and somebody else makes the decision. But for those who are paying attention to this hearing, who are part of the civilian workforce or their families, talk to me about the value add that 1/4 of the Army's workforce that's civilian provides to our nation's defense.
Senator, one of my other major lessons in the last 18 months in the role is how critical, crucial, and patriotic our civilian workers are. To your point, many of them are former service members who have gotten out, but even the ones who aren't, you don't take that job for the pay. You take that job because in the vast majority of instances, you care deeply about our country and you want to contribute as an expert. What we, the Army, have owed our civilians, we've tried to do over the last 8 or 9 months. We've kept a hiring freeze in place longer than most, and we did not do that because we want to overburden the civilian workforce. We did not do that just to be punitive to a process that had grown large and unwieldy. We did that because we wanted to take the time to thoughtfully match our people to our jobs that we needed. We've done that over the last 6 weeks. We are undoing or pulling off the hiring freeze in the vast majority of instances. And what we are cautiously optimistic is that going forward, what civilians should see in their day-to-day is a much more controlled management over their career. And what we hope that leads to is, even if we're not able to give them pay raises today, we should be able to give them paths to grow in their career and their profession to make more money.
I hope the committee might tackle this as we're working on the NDAA. Oftentimes, our civilians are just serving side by side with soldiers or other troops. I'm on the board at West Point. You've got, Army profs and assistant profs. You've got civilian profs and assistant profs when they're serving side by side, co-teaching classes and things like that, or serving in any other capacity, and one side is getting a pay raise and the other group is not. That does create some internal challenges. I hope we might deal with it. The only other issue I wanted to ask you, Senator Driscoll, is this. Last year during the hearing, I really focused with you just because it was sort of time critical and tragic, frankly, about staying engaged with the families who lost loved ones in the Flight 5342 crash that claimed the lives of civilians, patriotic soldiers, aviators. I think it's really, really important that we continue to be transparent, but also learn the lessons and improve. And you and I have had some conversations. The Army's already done a number of things to respond to NTSB preliminary reports and your own work, and that's positive. I think we have an opportunity to do more. But there are 3 Army investigations that are still pending about that crash. And I was told when the NTSB issued their report in January that the 3 were likely to come to a resolution sometime soon. My understanding is that's not the case. When will these investigations be done in your best estimation?
Sure, the 15-6, I think, is one of the ones you're talking about. That I just received the brief on it yesterday. You and I talked about
Yep.
this in the office call. That moves forward in the process to be able to get it in front of the Army families and then to be able to be, with the Secretary's consent, shared. And that process is moving on. I think that the 18th is of the month is the date that we're hoping to meet the gates.
And Senator, just to publicly reaffirm the commitment that I made privately to the families, we will be as transparent as law allows us because we too want to learn as much as we possibly can from this so it doesn't happen again.
And I would just encourage, as I close, obviously transparent with the Army families, but I think transparent with all those who lost their lives that day. Again, there may be some legal restrictions, but lawyers usually tell you that there are legal obstacles. There aren't. I say that as a lawyer. And I would just say we really owe it to these families to help them believe that we are doing everything possible to minimize the chance this will ever happen again.
And just on behalf of the Army, we wholeheartedly agree. And when I say families, I mean all of the
Great,
families.
thank you.
And thank you for that, gentlemen. Senator Cotton.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your appearance here and your service to our nation. Arlington National Cemetery is hallowed ground, not just for our Army, but for our entire nation. General Leneve, I first want to thank the Army and Secretary Driscoll for restoring the caisson detachment at Arlington National Cemetery following the unwise decision in 2023 to pause it. Caisson's participation in military funerals has been a time-honored tradition, honoring our nation's heroes and their families. I'm glad we're on track to move beyond limited operations and back to 4 squads performing funerals later this year. General Leneve, can we get your personal commitment that the Army will continue to prioritize the caisson detachment for years ahead, including the sustained resourcing the unit needs?
Yes, sir.
And can you also give us your personal commitment that you'll keep this committee informed of any delays or additional resources you might need to keep the caisson detachment fully operational?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. Secretary Driscoll, Pine Bluff Arsenal, along with the rest of the Army's organic industrial base, is essential to address our munitions crisis. I want to thank you and what the Army has done to make sure that we're fully using the organic industrial base. I'm pleased that the Army and the Arkansas congressional delegation's joint efforts have ensured that Pine Bluff will evolve and expand its mission to meet the needs of our military. The proposed enhanced use lease agreement with Hanwha is one prime example of working with private industry to enhance our organic industrial base. Of course, addressing the munitions needs that have been all on our minds today is going to require an all-of-the-above strategy for both private industry and Army programs of record. Given those demands and need to scale production across all 23 sites, can you tell us what's next in your thinking about how to ensure that installations like the Pine Bluff Arsenal and our other organic industrial base sites receive the government and private investment they need to help solve our munitions crisis?
Yes, sir, Senator. The Hanwha investment, I was down with the governor talking to Hanwha a couple weeks ago, and we are incredibly excited and proud of as using that as a pathfinder for how we can scale this across the country. The other pathfinder that we're doing is we went out to private industry to see was it possible to do data centers, and so we're excited to have 2 data centers, one in Texas, one in Utah, that we're using to build out the model to flex our might as an Army, where we have millions of acres of land where we can partner with private industry. What our next step was, Senator, is we basically went out with an RFI and we said, our American industry, what would you do on our bases, our arsenals, and our depots? We had 200 submissions last month. We have narrowed them down to about 110 that we could do. I'd say of those 110, 60 are some of the most well-known names in our largest private companies and private investors. Last week, we met with Treasury and we met with OMB. They're giving us full-time employees for 90 to 180 days for us to go through these 110 proposals. And what we are hoping to do is within a couple of weeks or months, be able to announce a lot more partnerships like Hanwha on our different arsenals and depots.
Good. Thank you. I think that's a very welcome development. These sites have languished for some years, and I'm glad that we're taking full advantage of all the opportunity they provide to help address our munitions crisis. I want to talk briefly about physical fitness standards. I'm pleased to see the Army leading the way on restoring fitness standards for combat troops. The new combat field test establishes a single mission-based standard that's aligned to the demands of combat, ensuring readiness and lethality in soldiers serving in, I believe, 24 designated combat military occupation specialties. Can you explain, Mr. Secretary, how high standards across all units of our military contribute to greater lethality?
Senator, I think in your experience in combat, certainly General Aneve, when we've spoken about it, when bullets start to fly, it doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female. It doesn't matter where you grew up. None of that matters. It is the perfect egalitarian system of can you be there for your battle buddy on your right and left? And what we, the Army, have tried to do in my time in, and then certainly in this seat, has been to model out that behavior across all of our different MOSs, but certainly our combat arms. And we are excited to follow President Trump's lead and Secretary of War Hegseth to continue to expand and invest in our soldiers to make them the most lethal fighting force in the world.
And these uniform standards, irrespective of sex, will not just be uniform standards, but high standards that's appropriate to the military occupation specialty?
It is a hard test, Senator.
Yes, sir, and high standards, sir. I have a daughter that's in the Army and a son that's in the Army, and they both want high standards across the board, for all of our occupational specialties, but especially the 24 that
So
are
you've done
in combat
the research. You're confident these standards are uniform and high. There's what's needed to be ready to fight in these MOSs, and now you'll apply this test, and the chips will fall where they may, no matter what the results are along race, sex, religion, political affiliation, or dietary preferences.
That's the intent, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here. It's been a marathon morning, I'm sure. Secretary Driscoll, I want to go back to some of the issues we raised, we discussed earlier in the closed session about prepositioned stock. This is not classified information, as I understand. But my understanding about the Army's interest in prepositioning stocks throughout Europe was because it reduces deployment times and it acts as a deterrence and helps in providing combat power for any contingency operations. Now, as I understand, General Grinkovich was interested in updating the APS before more troops are removed from his theater from Germany, because he's interested in being able to rapidly assemble 4 Armored Brigade combat teams. So you raised concerns about cost earlier. So can you talk about what's the cost difference between maintaining APS in theater versus surging forces and equipment from the U.S. in the event of a crisis?
Ma'am, thank you for the question. As we discussed earlier, there's a balance in there too of being able to surge forces to fall in on equipment that is ready and compatible with the equipment there. So APS, while is almost an insurance policy, that equipment stays at a level that at times is not compatible with the equipment that we would bring forward. I mean, to have equipment forward always is good for, speed to get personnel in place, but it is unsustainable at the cost right now. For
what the cost of what, transporting new equipment as the capabilities change, or the cost of guarding the equipment? Help us understand what the additional costs are that you're concerned about.
Maintaining equipment sets that just sit, and the cost associated with that, it's somewhere around $2 billion+ for that one BCT. And I know that General Grinkovich is looking at different ways to mitigate this cost to help the Army to be able to meet this requirement. As discussed earlier, we'd like to see those, some of those equipment be training sets that we could fall in on and utilize in exercises across Europe when needed.
So what would be the deterrent to doing that?
Well, it's just a different way to look at the equipment, and that would have to be a discussion between SACUR and the team. And I know that the Joint Chiefs is looking at this as well, and how our posture is across the world on all of our forward position forces or fleet.
So the issue is internal. You all could decide that you're going to use the equipment for training if you decide to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a different categorization of it, and then there's a different funding line associated with it.
but it's still an internal decision, you're
Yes,
telling
ma'am.
us. You. Secretary Driscoll, I want to go back to last year when you were helping to negotiate with the administration between Russia and Ukraine when when the administration offered a plan that looked like it had been written by Russia to end the war. And at that time, you suggested that it was important to get a peace deal as quickly as possible because Ukraine was facing defeat on the battlefield. I've seen a number of unclassified assessments and open source reports that I'm sure you've seen in the last month or so that suggests that not only is Ukraine not in danger of losing the war at this point, but they're actually that Russia is the one who's in danger of losing the war, and if we would just put a little more pressure on Russia, that their economy would be in real trouble. So can you tell us, do you think that Ukraine is, at this point, seems like it's been defeated, and what more should we be thinking about to do in order to pressure Russia so that they actually do lose this war?
Senator, I encourage anybody who has contacts in Ukraine, both individually, to ask about their experience with us and the broader administration, and then the United States Army more broadly has been there from day one supporting the Ukrainian people.
Well, I don't disagree with you on the Army. That's not really the question that I'm asking you. I'm asking you, and given that the administration just lifted the sanctions on Russian oil so that they're recouping about $4 billion a month because of that oil to help fund the war in Ukraine, and, by the way, to help fund, to help the Iranians with their targeting of U.S. military sites and service members in the Middle East. Why should we not think that there's a mismatch between what the Army is doing, as you say, and what the administration is doing with respect to helping the Russians to fund their war?
Senator's time has expired.
Thank you.
I yield myself 5 minutes. General, China's most recent defense white paper says that the PLA Navy is bolstering capabilities for, quote, maritime maneuver operations and maritime joint operations. In response, the U.S. Army's multi-domain task forces are becoming key to the Army's role in the Indo-Pacific. How important are MDTFs in deterring aggression in the Indo-Pacific, and what can I and members of the committee do to help you accelerate their critical capabilities?
Yes, sir. First, thanks for the question. Thanks for your support. The multi-domain task force is the multi-domain command, or the command is critical as a theater enabling element that the task forces can be placed across the Pacific at scale and operate underneath it. They're a critical component of deterrence, and then, if needed, the ability to bring those effects on any adversary. So the ability to have them forward in theater in positions that have a direct deterrence is critical for us. And we're seeking to support Admiral Paparo and his team and how they're looking at setting the theater for that.
Good. We want to be supportive, so let us know how we can support the Army as you advance that cause. Secretary Driscoll, you and I have talked many times before, and I appreciate your efforts to prepare the Army for the future battlefield. How are you balancing, though, the need to modernize and transform the active component while also ensuring that the Guard and the Reserve component retain the equipment and capabilities that they need for their mission?
Senator, I think what I appreciate those conversations we've had, and B, the Guard and the Reserve components, when we look at CENTCOM, when you look at the border, when you look at a lot of the missions that the United States Army has undertaken since I've been in the role, the Guard and the Reserve play an incredible role in that. And under both formerly General George and under General Laneeb, when we talk very specifically about resourcing everyone at the same time. Obviously, with budget constraints, that's not possible to technically do simultaneously, but what we don't want to do is we don't want to model out in how we roll out new equipment to the force this idea that they are anything other than an equal participant and oftentimes carrying the exact same burden when we go to conflict. And so we very explicitly are hoping to upgrade them to things like Next Gen C2 and give them new equipment as we roll it out to the broader force.
You and I have talked about this before, and as you know, Humvees are made in Indiana, a lot of really good jobs and workers that make the Humvee. It's important to Indiana, but it's also important to the Army, especially to the reserves. The Army Transformation Initiative transitions the Humvee away from the active component. At the same time, more than half of the adjutant generals have asked that Congress fund modernized Humvees. What role can the Humvee play for the Army Reserve and Guard across a wide range of missions like disaster relief and homeland security?
I would say, Senator, the Humvee has been an incredible asset for the U.S. Army for decades. And what we are not trying to say is that it will no longer have a role. We are trying to balance that out with other assets. But there are all sorts of things. One of the vehicles that we were able to make autonomously driven was a Humvee. Because it's drive-by-wire, just like the ISV, you can upgrade these things very quickly and use them for all sorts of purposes that if you were thinking about a non-autonomous vehicle, that constrains its use case in a way that once you're able to do all of these things with open architecture systems, the Humvee is going to be able to help us on the border. It's going to be able to help us with natural disasters. It's going to be able to help us in a lot of theaters where it may still have a lot of relevance, even if it's not the one-stop solution anymore.
Can you give us a quick update with the last 40 seconds I have left on how the transition's going?
Which transition, sorry?
Just overall, the
From the Humvee
overall
to the
Army
ISV.
Transformation Initiative.
Got it.
Just give us a progress report.
Yes, sir. So we are about 1 year in right now. It was May of last year when we did it. I try to look for leading indicators that it's actually working. I think the first one is and I invite anyone on the committee to actually go talk to soldiers. I think that they would say right now feels very different. The Army feels like it's moving quickly. I think if you look at what we're doing with our data on our business system side, or if you look at where we're doing this Operation Jailbreak, but it's been occurring before, those are all good. If you look at the new M1E3, the Flora, the different systems that we are procuring there are all open architecture, and these are the types of platforms and assets that can change in the future in a way that we just historically have not thought about it.
My time has expired.
Thank you, Senator Banks. Senator Senator Kelly, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Secretary Driscoll, the electronic proving ground. It's near Fort Huachuca, provides a very unique electronic warfare testing capability, largely because it has very favorable geography, protected airspace surrounded on all sides by terrain. And because of that, we've got an ability there to conduct very aggressive electronic warfare and jamming tests with minimal interference that goes beyond the area. This is the kind of testing we need to understand how our systems would perform if we were up against near-peer adversaries. And that's why I've been kind of frustrated by the Army's lack of communication regarding changes that are already underway at EPG. We've tried to engage with the Army multiple times. My office has learned about staffing reductions and mission impacts after they've happened, even though we're trying to communicate with the leadership. So we're trying to proactively engage, but we're not getting the response that we would normally expect. And it's one of the Army's premier facilities for EW and spectrum operations. So when the Army reduces capacity there without clearly articulating some kind of long-range plan, it raises real questions about how these decisions align with the Army's stated priorities with regards to modernization. So I'd just like a commitment from you if we could work with your office to try to, figure out what's going on and make sure that the decisions we are making are in the best interest of the Army.
Senator, absolutely. And just to go back a step, one of the things we've tried to model out in the last 18 months is ultra responsiveness, ultra transparency, ultra clarity, both to the private sector, to our larger defense partners through the primes and the smaller mids, and then also to all of you. And so I apologize that we haven't been faster and more clear, but we will remedy that.
All right. Thank you. And then on another subject, I'm a bit concerned about the Army's direction here on aviation. You know, this year you're spending $4 billion. Next year you're requesting half of that. Your requests includes 0 AH-64 Apaches, 0 Chinook Block 2s, and 1 UH-60 Black Hawk. And while I understand the intent of the Army Transformation Initiative, I'm also concerned that we're divesting in some capabilities that fill a critical requirement. We talked a little bit about this, General, about learning the correct lesson from the, former conflict, and we've got to be really careful here. And we don't have a validated replacement for these systems. A reasonable path forward, I think, would be to sustain Army aircraft we have and use their capacity until we integrate new technologies. But instead, we're facing a budget request that leaves Congress no assurances that the Army, and especially the National Guard, will not suffer from a significant capability gap in its ability to move people and weapons, cargo, but also put, fire, downrange, especially with regards to the Apache. It's also I'm concerned that we might be repeating a mistake that we saw with the Air Force and the A-10, where the service spent years arguing it could retire the platform, only to realize that there's a critical mission need and nothing to fill it. And then suddenly, with extra costs now, extend the aircraft's life after the industrial capacity and its sustainment challenges have gotten worse. Once production lines and suppliers and workforce capacity disappear, rebuilding them can be rather costly and time-consuming. And this budget, I think, threatens the health of the defense industrial base in that regard. Industry has been very clear that foreign sales on these systems are not enough to sustain the production lines past maybe the early 2030s. We've also been hearing from some small businesses. I heard one that says, hey, the writing is on the wall here, and it wants to get out of the business of supporting Army helicopters. So that could be something you're going to have to deal with. But, Mr. Secretary, you continue to say that the Apache, Black Hawk, Chinook have a role and need to be modernized. But the budget doesn't actually get us there. So can you explain, I know I'm over my time here, how do we do this and sustain these systems under this existing budget request?
You can supplement your answer on the record also, but go ahead and try to answer briefly.
Absolutely, Senator. So our intent, and we've, as you rightly pointed out, tried to say on the record a number of times, excuse me, these systems will be in the Army's life for a very long time. What we are trying to do is get out in advance of the number that we will have at total as we start to bring on things like Flora. What does that ideal balance look like? And so that's what you see reflected in the current budget. I think we are optimistic that FMS will make up a lot of the cases to keep these lines on. Sorry.
But still in the budget, right now, 1 Black Hawk, 0 Apache, 0 Chinook. And the FMS thing, from as my office has looked into this, it just doesn't seem like enough to sustain the helicopter industrial base. So thank you. I'm sorry I'm over my time.
Thank you for that observation, Senator. Senator Slotkin, I'm sure you are as delighted as I am that Senator Rosen has appeared. Senator Rosen, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Wicker, for holding this hearing. Sorry, Senator Slotkin. Anyway, thank you, Secretary Driscoll, General Laneeve, for testifying today for the classified briefing, which was terrific. I appreciate your service. I want to talk a little bit about duty status reform because as evidenced in recent operations, the National Guard has evolved from a strategic reserve into a consistently operational force. The reserve components are now relied upon at unprecedented pace for overseas deployment and state emergency activations, often with a disparity of entitlements depending on their duty status. Reserve component soldiers experience the bureaucratic inequities of no fewer than 29 different and cumbersome duty statuses, which prevent them from receiving the same pay and benefits as their active duty counterparts performing the same duties. So Secretary Driscoll, there is a DoD legislative proposal to fix this issue that OMB has not yet cleared for Congress to consider. And this is really hurting our Guard. And so in the meantime, what specific initiatives is the Army considering to modernize and consolidate these duty statuses? Number one, you're going to reduce administrative burden, you're going to improve pay and benefits continuity, and better support our Guard and Reserve soldiers. And how are you going to support duty status reform? It is critical for retention, taking care of our Guard and Reserve, and retention of our Guard and Reserve.
Yeah, ma'am, first off,
Yeah.
thanks for recognizing the incredible commitment and impact that all of the components, but especially our Reserve and Guard, are playing right now across the globe. We are taking a look at this. We're tied in with the department as they're looking at this broadly as a entire department, not just an Army alone.
Thank you. It is really critical. Secretary Driscoll, I think we have to do it across agency, across services, but it's really important, and it's hurting our Guard in Nevada and, of course, across the country.
And Senator, they just handed me a note saying it just cleared OMB.
It just cleared. Well, there you
So,
go. And that's how fast I asked the question, got it done, and that's how, and there we go. Well, thank you for that. You made my day.
Of course, and I would just follow up really quickly, and this is a very boring thing we don't reference often, but our business systems, like the duty status matters a lot.
Yes.
But it's also our business systems are failing our soldiers.
Yeah.
And so this is the back end of how they get paid and how they get their benefits
That's
and
right.
how we treat the care
That's
for them and
why I
their
brought it
families.
up as my number one question. Thank you.
We are trying to optimize it all.
I want to quickly, in the time I have left, talk about the cyber workforce. The FY24 NDAA included my bipartisan legislation authorizing the Army to create a civilian cybersecurity reserve to provide cybercom with qualified civilian personnel for surge capacity, ensuring the U.S. government has the cyber talent needed to respond to malicious activity and secure DoD's information and systems. I'm the ranking member on Cyber Security Committee here. And so to both of you, can you provide a status update on the Army's implementation of the Civilian Cybersecurity Reserve? And to the Secretary, can you also add, given that cyber personnel are often able to earn significantly higher compensation outside of government service, what authorities or compensation reforms does the Army need from Congress to better compete with the private sector for elite cyber talent? How are you measuring that, and what can we do to help?
Senator, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. We will follow up with your office on a more timely cybersecurity reserve update, and so we can provide you an update on where it is. More broadly speaking, what authorities would we need? I think when you actually look at the threat from a peer or near peer, take China as an example, and their ability to tie in their cyber talent into their research universities and their private companies. We as a nation do not have something like that. And all that guarantees is that we will not be able to keep up. What we do have is, if you look at our models from OpenAI and Google, all of those are first class, best in class. But we need the human beings to be able to operate
So
them.
I want you, we're going to do the mark in a few weeks, and as ranking member on cyber, I know Senator Rounds and I might really like to have that update from you, if you could talk about that. In general, there's just a few seconds left if you want to talk about it at all. Otherwise, I'm going to yield to Senator Slotkin.
Yeah, I concur with Secretary, ma'am, and we'll follow back up with you on
Thank
where
you.
we're at.
The sooner the better. That way we have some good input for the mark in less than a few weeks now. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Slotkin.
Great. You're almost done. If you're to me, you're at the end, the bitter end.
There is a vote on, but I think we can both make it.
Thank you. Thank you. I know. I'm paying my dues here. So two very different questions. Thank you. I know Senator Peters said this too, but thank you for coming to Michigan last year, coming to see Northern Strike, biggest multi-domain exercise east of the Mississippi. And thank you for coming to Detroit as well to see some of the tech innovation we have going on. Given our manufacturing base, we really feel we can increase the number of military missions and contracts that we have coming through Michigan. We talked, you came and talked to a bunch of our defense contractors in Macomb County about the Army Transformation Initiative. And while we want deeply to modernize, there are certain things, since we do land vehicles, where we're kind of on the losing end of that experience. So we're trying to find other areas. And I think where we're poised to really break out and become the nation's leader is on drone R&D and manufacturing. Drones are becoming ubiquitous. I was just looking at where we had some deadly tornadoes. They did search and rescue via drone. People are looking for their lost pets as a service now. You can hire a drone service. We want to be poised, but what are the other things, and we were very happy, I should say, just early this year, the Army designated one of our facilities up north as the first drone testing site in the country. So we feel like we're ready to really take this to the next level. How should we be thinking back home briefly about advanced manufacturing using the capabilities that Michigan in particular has to serving the next generation of Army soldier?
Senator, I think your state in particular, with its deep, rich manufacturing history, can help us solve a problem that globally we are still gapped as a human species, but then specifically the United States Army for conflict, these larger Group 3, Group 4, Group 5 drones, when we compliment the Russians and we compliment the Ukrainians, what we really mean is they're very good at building the smaller ones. The larger ones, the types of drones that will one day be able to supplement or someday far in the future replace things like the Apache, are much larger, much more difficult to build, require a lot of deep expertise and a lot of investment. And so that is a place, I think, when we look out at the assets we as a nation have, we think Michigan and Camp Grayling can help us refine what we're working on and help expand it and scale it.
Yeah, well, we want to be good partners in that, and we're the arsenal of democracy and have a rich tradition of being there when our country needs us. So would love to talk to you more about that. Break, separate topic. You were up in at Camp Grayling, which is Grayling, Michigan, which has, like other military communities, had a problem with PFAS contamination. I met via Zoom with a bunch of local community advocates. These are folks who are deeply supportive of the military presence. This is not just like we have in other Air Force and former Air Force locations in Michigan, up in Oscoda. These are people who believe in the mission, but they can't drink their well water. The lake that Camp Grayling is on, Lake Marguerite, people can't, they can't drink the water in that area. There's concerns when there's foam. They can't let their kids or their dogs touch that foam. So it's a real thing, and the Army does have a responsibility. There was a $20 million set aside by the Army to clean that up, and early this year, we got the word that they want to do more testing before they engage in any cleanup. And I've seen this movie with the Air Force, and I just am asking your commitment. We understand that testing may need to go on for the rest of this calendar year, but that has often been used as a way to push off and never take responsibility when people are literally having to buy their own water or get it provided to them. So can I get your commitment that you'll look at this particularly, and that we will not go beyond 2026 for that additional testing so these people have some remediation, some cleanup of their wells?
I commit, Senator, following up with your office with a very clear answer. I don't know the specifics of the timing of the testing, but my experience has been we don't intentionally do those things to delay. So I will check in and we will follow.
Yeah, I think there's been generations of folks on, again, not just Army, other services, but this is not the beginning of this movie, right? It may be new to you guys. It's not new to these communities, and would just ask for your commitment to follow up. Any of us, if we had a home on a lake, would want to be able to have our kids swim there safely and drink the water. So would just appreciate you looking into it.
Yes,
Thank you.
Senator Slotkin, how long has this been a known problem?
So both in Army communities and in former Air Force base up in Oscoda, years and years and years. At this point, it's got to be over a decade. We have some Michigan residents who have more PFAS in their blood than any other human beings on earth. So, and again, these are dedicated communities who love the military, but can't like send their kids to certain summer camps because there's so much contamination in their local lakes. So this was an issue I'm big on in the House, and I continue to be hammering it in the Senate. Would love your help, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Driscoll, I appreciated our meeting yesterday. Thank you. Especially when you committed to providing the families of the DCA crash victims the findings from any Army investigations without any additional administrative hurdles. From my seat on both this committee and Commerce, Science, and Transportation, I look forward to working with you to implement necessary reforms to make sure that our airspace is safe both for the flying public but also for our warfighters as well. I do want now to turn to the Army's organic industrial base. In my state, Rock Island Arsenal is home to critical manufacturing of munitions and equipment. The Joint Munitions Command, which delivers munitions to the battlefield, and the Army Sustainment Command, which drives the Army's logistics enterprise, to name only a few of the arsenal's critical functions. So, as I mentioned to you, I was very concerned to hear in March that the Army was suddenly reassigning employees who manage our munitions and sustainment in the middle of a war. Over the past 2 months, I've heard from constituents who, instead of focusing on their missions, were thrust into personal turmoil by the Army through a hasty personnel campaign. In March, as many as 155 civilian workers at Rock Island, many of whom are veterans themselves, were told, and I quote, that they were surplus employees, end quote. And they were left in limbo for weeks, worried that they would lose their jobs, with many only being told later, much later, weeks later, never mind. Some of these so-called surplus employees were given only 2 to 5 days to accept a job out of state and uproot their families or face termination from civil service. 2 to 5 days, that's it. 2 to 5 days to make a life-altering career decision. I don't think this is how we should be treating our patriotic career civilians. And my constituents are worried about the still uncertain merger of two critical commands, the Joint Munitions Command and the Army Sustainment Command, and what it means for their jobs and their missions. Secretary Driscoll, do you commit to notifying me and this committee before any additional workforce changes at Rock Island Arsenal, including from the merger at JMC and ASC?
Senator, to all of your remarks, and it was helpful meeting with you yesterday. Those populations, we aspired to do what was right. We aspired to be thoughtful. Giving 2 to 5 days is probably not sufficient for that decision in hindsight. And so my commitment to you is after meeting with you, I went back, talked to the team, and we will try, if we have to do similar, have similar conversations to give more time and more grace for people to make these big decisions. To your question, Senator, we will do our very best to include you in your office in any sort of hiring that we have to do for Rock Island.
Will you contact us before it actually takes place? Especially if you're terminating people?
Senator, I'm not intending to pause unnecessarily. I am trying to think through the process of if we had to get rid of one individual because of some sort of...
No, I mean like an effort.
Generally, the spirit of your question, yes.
Okay, thank you. Shifting gears to another issue, the domestic misuse of the military in American cities and the taxpayers' waste that has gone with it. Months ago, President Trump claimed that he mobilized 500 National Guardmen to reduce crime in Chicago, his words, but they never set foot in Chicago. They stayed confined to bases in Illinois because federal courts and our Supreme Court found their deployment illegal and cost taxpayers $21 million in the process. But President Trump's obsession with misusing the military in American streets is not over. And he, in fact, often threatens to deploy the Guard for political purposes, from saying he might send them to airports to lamenting he should have had them, and these are his words, seize the ballots in 2020. So this is not hypothetical. He said that. And don't forget, thousands of Guardsmen are still in Washington, D.C. under no valid mission and also are doing so at great taxpayer expense. In fact, for fiscal year 2027, the president is requesting $605 million for D.C. deployment of the National Guard. Just outside the walls of this building, Guardsmen are forced to be away from their families and jobs to rove around the city in packs of 6, bored, picking up trash, or gardening, all while the National Guard has actual missions to train for, like responding to natural disasters or preparing for combat. And I'd like to discuss some of the ways the Army could better use the $605 million that the president wants to waste on unnecessarily deploying the military to the nation's capital. Secretary Driscoll, yes or no, do you agree with the call in the Army Transformation Initiative to expand pre-positioned stocks in the Indo-Pacific?
Yes.
Well, for $605 million, the Army could fund 11 times the pre-positioned stocks for repair parts and supplies in Japan and Korea than it had last year. That's what $605 million could pay for. I'll give you another example. Yes or no, do you agree that soldiers and their families deserve access to affordable health care?
Yes.
For $605 million for that DC deployment, the Army could provide 15,125 military families IVF treatments. Instead of misusing the guard to stoke his ego, President Trump could keep his campaign promise, and I quote, these are his words, he wants to pay for all costs associated with IVF treatments for our heroes. I urge Congress to invest these funds where it really matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I'd like to thank our witnesses for their testimony. 20 members have been able to ask questions during this open hearing. For the information of members, questions for the record will be due to the committee within 2 business days of the conclusion of this hearing, which is right now. We are adjourned.